The drill bit came up black at 0400 hours, and I knew we'd hit something we shouldn't have. Not oil. I've been working these Arctic rigs for 11 years, ever since the divorce, and I know what crude looks like when it surfaces. This was different, thicker, had this weird blue-green shimmer under the deck lights that made my gut clench up the way it did when Emma called to tell me she was moving to Anchorage with some dentist named Brad. Villalobos, you seeing this? That was Tommy Hagen, my driller, 23 years old, and still thought he was invincible. Kid from Prudhoe Bay who'd never worked anywhere but the North Slope. Wore a Carhartt jacket 2 sizes too big that used to be his dad's. I was seeing it. The core sample container, we called it the pickle jar, stupid nickname from the old days, was half full of this sludge that looked like it was moving on its own. Probably just the ship's vibration. Probably. We were anchored off the Beaufort Sea, 200 miles from anything resembling civilization, drilling into permafrost that hadn't seen daylight in maybe 50,000 years. The company, Petrex Energy, paid us triple hazard rates to work up here. They didn't pay us enough to deal with whatever the hell this was. Get it to the lab, I told him. And don't touch it with your bare hands. Use the tongs. I'm not stupid, Villalobos. Your dad said the same thing right before he grabbed that valve without gloves and left 3 fingers in the North Sea. Tommy went quiet. Good. Kid needed to respect the equipment. Respect the environment. We were drilling 4,000 feet below the seabed into permafrost older than human civilization, and every sample we pulled up was a gamble. Most days it was just frozen dirt and occasional mastodon bones. The paleontology guys from the university loved those. This wasn't bones. I should have shut down the drill right then. Should have called Peterson, the rig manager, and told him we had a situation. But Peterson was a company man through and through. His office had a framed photo of the Petrex CEO, some guy named Vandermeer who'd never touched a drill in his life, and I already knew what he'd say. Log it, label it, keep drilling. We were behind schedule. 3 weeks behind, actually, because we'd had to evacuate in October when that storm came through and nearly tore the derrick off its moorings. Emma texted me last week. You're going to die up there for a company that doesn't even know your name. She wasn't wrong. They called me Villalobos on the radio, never Raphael. Like I was a piece of equipment instead of a person. The rig groaned beneath my feet. It always did that around this time. Thermal contraction from the temperature drop. Metal shrinking in the -40 cold. We had 67 people on board. Roughnecks, engineers, cooks, that one welder from Louisiana who couldn't stop talking about his mama's gumbo. Good people. People who trusted me to keep them safe because I was the drilling supervisor and safety was supposed to be my job. Tommy carried the sample container like it was nitroglycerin, which maybe it was for all I knew. The deck was slick with ice. It always was, no matter how much salt we threw down, and I watched him nearly slip twice. The wind was picking up, that howling Arctic wind that sounded like something dying. Forecast said we had another storm coming in tomorrow. This one was supposed to be worse. The lab was in the belly of the rig, down 3 levels, past the crew quarters where guys were sleeping or playing cards or video calling their families with the shitty satellite internet that cut out every 10 minutes. Dr. Elizabeth Pruitt ran the lab, environmental compliance, she called it, though really she was just there to make sure we weren't drilling up anything that would get Petrex sued. She'd worked for the company for 30 years. Had that look of someone who'd seen too much and stopped caring. What V you got for me? She asked without looking up from her microscope. She was examining some plankton sample or something, always examining something. Core from depth marker 4100, I said. Permafrost layer. Has some kind of, I don't know what to call it. Contamination, maybe? That got her attention. She looked at the sample container, and I saw her face change. Just for a second, this little flicker of concern, before she put on her professional mask again. Interesting color, she said. Yeah, that's one word for it. She unsealed the container using the sterile protocol, gloves, face shield, all that, and took a small sample onto a slide. Under the microscope, she went very still. I've seen that stillness before. It's what people do when they're trying not to panic. Raphael, she said, and the fact that she used my first name made my stomach drop. I need you to get Peterson down here. Now. And tell the crew. She stopped, reconsidered. Don't tell the crew anything yet. What is it? I don't know. But it's viable. It's alive. The thing about permafrost is that it's a time capsule. Freeze something fast enough, cold enough, and it stays preserved. Bacteria, viruses, things that died millennia ago, just waiting for someone stupid enough to drill them back up. The Russians found something in Siberia a few years back. Scientists got sick, whole facility shut down, nobody talked about it after. We heard rumors. Oil workers always hear rumors. I radioed Peterson, who showed up 15 minutes later in his clean Petrex jumpsuit that never had any actual oil on it. He smelled like coffee and aftershave. Behind him came Dr. Nathan Webb, the rig's medical officer. Webb was maybe 50, ex-Navy, had this way of looking at you like he was already calculating your life expectancy. What am I looking at? Peterson asked. Pruitt adjusted the microscope for him. Microscopic organisms. Bacterial or viral, I can't tell yet without better equipment. But they're active, motile, and they're reproducing at a rate I've never seen before. From the permafrost sample? Yes. And they're dangerous? I have no idea. But I want this rig quarantined until I know more. No one leaves. No one comes aboard. Peterson laughed. Actually laughed. Dr. Pruitt, we're already quarantined. We're 200 miles from land. Where exactly do you think people are going to go? I want the sample destroyed, she said. That sample is company property. It gets logged and sent to the mainland with everything else. Listen to me very carefully. Pruitt's voice went flat. Dangerous. I've worked for Petrex for 3 decades. I've lied on reports. I've buried data. I've done things I'm not proud of because that was the job. But if you don't destroy the sample right now, you're going to kill everyone on this rig. The lab went very quiet. Even the background hum of the ventilation seemed to pause. That's a strong claim, Peterson said carefully. You have evidence to support it? Evidence? Look through the goddamn microscope yourself. Those organisms are unlike anything I've seen in 30 years of environmental work. They're aggressive. They're adaptable. And they've been frozen for, she checked her notes, based on the core depth, maybe 60,000 years. So they're ancient, Peterson said. Doesn't mean they're dangerous to humans. Modern immune systems have never encountered them, Webb interrupted. That's the problem. Our bodies won't recognize them as a threat until it's too late. I should have spoken up then. Should have backed Pruitt. But I was thinking about the schedule, about the bonus we'd all get if we finished drilling on time, about Emma and the child support payments and my mama back in Galveston who needed a new roof before hurricane season. I was thinking about all the wrong things. We'll take precautions, Peterson said finally. The sample stays in the lab, sealed, until we can get it properly analyzed on the mainland. Dr. Pruitt, you'll monitor it. Dr. Webb, you'll screen the crew for any unusual symptoms. Villalobos, you'll... The lights went out. Emergency lights kicked in after 3 seconds. Standard protocol. Bathing everything in that sickly red glow that made everyone look like corpses. The backup generator was rumbling to life somewhere below us. Just a power fluctuation, Peterson said, but his voice had gone tight. It wasn't a fluctuation. The lights had gone out because someone on crew had touched something they shouldn't have. Because Tommy Hagen, that stupid kid who thought he was invincible, had wiped his forehead with his glove, the same glove that had brushed against the sample container's seal, and was now in his bunk, burning up with a fever of 104 degrees. We didn't know that yet, but we were about to find out. The intercom crackled at 0647 hours. Medical emergency, deck 3. Medical emergency, deck 3. Webb's voice carefully controlled, which meant it was bad. I was in the galley drinking my 3rd cup of coffee, the cheap stuff that tasted like burnt cardboard, but caffeine was caffeine when the call came through. Around me, the early shift crew was eating breakfast. Biscuits and gravy that the cook, a guy named Diego from El Paso, made every Wednesday. Comfort food for men who lived in a steel box surrounded by ice. That's Tommy's bunk level, someone said. I was already moving. Deck 3 crew quarters smelled like sweat and fear. 8 guys crowded the hallway outside Tommy's cabin, nobody wanting to get too close. Through the open door, I could see Webb bent over the bunk, and I could hear Tommy moaning. Not normal pain sounds. Something else. Something animal. Everyone back to your stations, I ordered. Now, they scattered. Good crew, mostly. They knew when to listen. Tommy's skin had gone gray. Not pale gray, like old meat. His eyes were open but unfocused, pupils blown so wide they'd swallowed the color. The veins in his neck stood out black against his skin, pulsing in rhythm with his heart. He was shivering so hard the whole bunk was rattling. Temperature's 106, Webb said without looking up. Started spiking about an hour ago. He woke up at 0600 complaining of headache and nausea, thought it was food poisoning. By 0630 he was like this. Food poisoning doesn't do this. No, it doesn't. I thought about the sample, about Tommy carrying that container, about the seal that might not have been perfect, about the way he always wiped his forehead when he was concentrating. Stupid habits, deadly habits. We need to isolate him, Webb said, and we need to know if anyone else is showing symptoms. Pruitt said to quarantine the rig. Pruitt was worried about containment. I'm worried about transmission. Webb finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my mouth go dry. Raphael, I was a field medic in Afghanistan. I've seen hemorrhagic fevers, chemical exposure, radiation sickness. I've never seen anything work this fast. Tommy started seizing. His whole body went rigid, back arching, foam bubbling from his mouth. Webb grabbed a sedative from his kit, jammed the needle into Tommy's thigh. Took 30 seconds to work, 30 seconds of watching a kid I'd worked with for 2 years thrash like a hooked fish. When Tommy finally went still, his breathing was wrong. Bit. Ragged. Like his lungs were full of fluid. Get Peterson, Webb said, and get Pruitt. And for God's sake, tell everyone to stay away from the lab samples. I radioed Peterson, who was in his office doing paperwork. Company men always had paperwork. While I waited for him to show up, I pulled up the crew roster on my tablet. 67 people. 12 had direct contact with the drill floor in the last shift. 5 had been in the lab area. Tommy had talked to maybe a dozen people since pulling that sample. If this thing was contagious, I didn't want to finish that thought. Peterson arrived with Pruitt. She took one look at Tommy and said, "Fuck, professional assessment?" I asked. "He's infected with whatever was in that sample. And if my preliminary analysis is correct..." She stopped, started again. The organisms show characteristics consistent with ancient viral families, ones that predate modern humans. Our immune systems don't have any reference points for this. So what's the treatment? There isn't one. We don't have antivirals on board that would touch something like this. Even if we did, she gestured at Tommy's gray skin, his labored breathing. Look at the progression speed. Whatever this is, it's extremely aggressive. We need to evacuate him, Peterson said. Get him to a mainland hospital. No. Webb's voice was sharp. Absolutely not. You put him on a helicopter, you risk spreading this to Prudhoe Bay, Fairbanks, Anchorage. We contain this here or we risk a pandemic. You're suggesting we just let him die? I'm suggesting we don't have a choice. The thing about the oil industry is that it runs on calculated risks. Every day you weigh potential profit against potential disaster. Drill here might hit oil, might hit salt water. Push the equipment harder, might finish ahead of schedule, might blow a valve and kill 3 men. It's all mathematics and liability reports and insurance premiums. This wasn't a calculated risk. This was chaos wrapped in ice and corporate policy. I'm calling Petrex corporate, Peterson said. This is above my authority level. You do that, Pruitt said. Meanwhile, I'm going back to the lab. If there's any chance of identifying this organism and developing a treatment protocol, I need to work fast. She left. Webb stayed with Tommy, monitoring vitals that kept dropping. I stood there in that cramped cabin that smelled like sickness and fear, and I thought about my daughter, Lucia, 8 years old, loved dinosaurs and hot chocolate, lived with her mother and Brad, the dentist in Anchorage. I was supposed to have her for Christmas this year, my year, according to the custody agreement, and I'd been planning to take her to see the Northern Lights. If I got sick, if this thing spread, Tommy started coughing. Black fluid bubbled from his mouth, thick and viscous like the sample we'd pulled from the drill. Webb tried to suction it out, but there was too much, it just kept coming. Tommy's eyes rolled back in his head. His chest heaved once, twice, then stopped. Webb checked for a pulse, tried CPR, tried everything he was supposed to try. But we both knew it was over. 23 years old. Kid from Prudhoe Bay who'd never worked anywhere but the North Slope. Dead in less than 3 hours from first symptoms. Time of death, 0714, Webb said quietly. I'm sealing this cabin. Nobody comes in without full hazmat protocol. We don't have hazmat suits, I said. Then nobody comes in. I left him there with Tommy's body and went topside. The sun was just starting to edge above the horizon. We only got a few hours of twilight this time of year, and the sky was doing that thing it does in the Arctic where it's not quite day and not quite night, just this endless blue-gray limbo. The wind had picked up. Storm forecast was getting worse. 40-foot seas expected by tomorrow afternoon. My radio crackled. Villalobos, this is drill control. We've got another situation. Of course we did. What now? It's Jensen. He's in the drill shack and he's... You need to see this. Ricky Jensen was my mud engineer, 38. From somewhere in Texas he never talked about. Handled the drilling fluid, monitored pressure systems, kept the drill bit from overheating. Good at his job. Quiet. Divorced, like most of us. Had a tattoo of a compass on his forearm that he said represented his ex-wife. She'd helped him find his way, then pointed him toward the door. I found him in the drill shack, naked from the waist up, scrubbing his skin with a wire brush. Blood ran down his arms in thin streams. His skin was turning gray. Jensen, stop. He looked at me and his eyes were wrong. Cloudy. Unfocused. It's under my skin, he said. I can feel it moving under my skin. There's nothing under your skin. You're sick. You need medical attention. I was in the lab. His voice was dreamy, distant. Wanted to see what Pruitt was looking at. Opened the sample container. Just a little. Just to see. Smelled like old ice. Like time. Jesus Christ. How long ago? Yesterday. After you brought it in. I was curious. I'm always curious. That's why Angela left. Said I was always looking for something I couldn't find. He dug the wire brush into his chest, drawing fresh blood. Now I found it, and it found me. I grabbed the brush from his hand, threw it across the shack. Webb's in crew quarters. I'm taking you to him. Webb can't help. Nobody can help. Jensen smiled, and it was the worst smile I'd ever seen. You know what's funny? The company knew. They've been looking for this. Old diseases locked in the ice. Biotech applications, they called it. Patents and profit. That's why we're drilling so deep into permafrost. Why do you think they're paying triple hazard rates? You're delirious. I'm clear-headed for the first time in weeks. He looked down at his bloodied chest. This thing moves fast, Raphael. Faster than anything natural. Like it's been waiting. Like it's hungry. He collapsed. Just folded up like someone cut his strings. I caught him before he hit the deck. Dragged him toward the medical bay. He was burning up. Fever so high I could feel it through my gloves. His breathing was already going wet and wrong. Lungs filling up the way Tommy's had. Reb mit me halfway. One look at Jensen and his face went hard. Another one? He opened the sample. Yesterday. Then there could be more. Anyone he breathed on, touched, shared air with. Webb didn't finish. We both knew the math. exponential transmission, confined space, 65 people still healthy, for now. By 1200 hours, we had 8 sick. By 1400, 15. Webb converted the conference room into an isolation ward. But we didn't have enough supplies, enough beds, enough anything. The sick lay on tarps on the floor, burning with fever, coughing up that black sludge. Some died fast like Tommy. Others lingered, screaming about things under their skin. Pruitt worked in the lab, running tests with equipment meant for basic water quality analysis, trying to understand something that had evolved in isolation for 60,000 years. She looked like she'd aged a decade in 10 hours. "It's a virus," she told me and Peterson in the hallway outside her lab. "But it's unlike any viral structure I've seen. It's incorporating elements of bacterial cell walls, protozoal complexity. It's like it's multiple organisms working in concert. And it's adaptive. Every sample I take shows slightly different characteristics. How do we kill it?" Peterson asked. "I don't know. Standard disinfectants slow it down but don't kill it. Heat seems promising. Above 300 degrees Fahrenheit it breaks down. But we can't exactly set the rig on fire. Could we?" I thought about the gas lines running through the platform, the drill fuel, the emergency flares. The rig was a floating bomb if you knew which valves to open. What about evacuation? Peterson was still focused on that. The storm's coming in. If we're going to get people off, you evacuate and you spread this to the mainland. Webb interrupted. He joined us, still wearing his surgical mask, gloves dark with blood. "I've reported to the CDC. They've issued a federal quarantine order. No one leaves this rig." "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. There are 2 helicopters on this rig. I've disabled both. If anyone tries to leave, I'll personally shoot down the aircraft." He said it calmly, like he was discussing the weather. "I was authorized to take any measures necessary to contain this situation. That authorization comes from the Secretary of Defense." The lights flickered. Not the power grid this time, the lights stayed on, but something else. The ventilation fans hiccuped, and for a moment, the rig went very quiet. Then someone started screaming in the isolation ward. We ran. The conference room looked like a scene from hell. 15 infected, all in various stages. Some still lucid, some already gray and dying. Some in that middle stage where they were strong enough to move but too far gone to think clearly. One of them, Paulson, a Derek Hand from Minnesota, had gotten up, was walking. Shouldn't have been able to walk with a fever of 105, but he was moving anyway, stumbling toward the door. His eyes were black, pupils swallowing everything, and when he saw us, he lunged. Webb shot him, just like that. Drew a pistol I didn't know he was carrying and put 2 rounds center mass. Paulson went down hard. "Jesus Christ!" Peterson shouted. "You just murdered. Look at him." We looked. Paulson was still moving. Not dying. Moving. The wounds in his chest leaked black fluid, not blood. He crawled toward us, making sounds that weren't human anymore. Webb shot him again. In the head this time. Paulson finally stopped. "It's not just a virus," Webb said quietly. "It's changing them. Rewriting their neurology, maybe their entire physiology. They're not people anymore." I thought about zombie movies. Thought about how stupid that sounded. Except Paulson was dead on the floor with 3 bullets in him, and 10 minutes ago he'd been a guy who complained about the coffee and called his kids every Sunday. The other infected were getting agitated. Some were trying to stand. The ones who could still talk were begging for help, but their voices were wrong, distorted, like their throats were reshaping. "We need to secure this room," I said. "Now." We backed out. Webb locked the door. Industrial deadbolt, meant for emergency lockdowns, and we stood in the hallway listening to them pound and shriek. "They'll die soon," Webb said. "The virus burns through them too fast. They can't sustain that fever for long." "And then what?" Peterson asked. "What happens to their bodies?" "I don't know, but I did. I'd seen enough horror movies. I knew what happened when you left infected bodies in a confined space. They didn't stay dead. Or they stayed dead but became something else. Or they became vectors for further spread. Nothing good. Pruitt appeared, moving fast, eyes wild. I need everyone to listen very carefully. The ventilation system has been recirculating air for the last 4 hours. If this virus is airborne, is it? I asked. I don't know, but the infection rate suggests either airborne transmission or contact with contaminated surfaces. Maybe both. And we've got 65 people still healthy, all breathing the same air, touching the same surfaces. What's the protocol? Peterson asked. There is no protocol. This is unprecedented. Pruitt was practically shouting now. I've been on the radio with CDC, with Army Medical Research, with everyone I can reach. Nobody knows what to do. The best advice I got was contain and monitor. But we can't contain it. It's everywhere. The rig shuddered. Not thermal contraction this time, storm surge. The weather was coming in early. 40-foot seas were already hitting us, and it was going to get worse. How long until the storm peaks? I asked. 18 hours, Peterson said. Maybe less. Can we ride it out? If the rig holds together, if the anchors hold, if we don't lose power. He paused. If half the crew isn't dead or infected by then. I looked at these people, Peterson in his clean jumpsuit, still worried about company protocols. Webb with his pistol and his military bearing. Pruitt with her 30 years of buried data and corporate complicity, and I realized none of them were going to make the hard choice. So I would have to. We have 2 options, I said. We stay and hope some kind of rescue arrives, that someone figures out how to cure this thing before everyone's infected. Or we destroy the rig. Destroy, Peterson started. Set fire to the whole platform. Kill the virus with heat. Make sure this thing doesn't spread to the mainland. That's insane. We'd die. We're already dead, Webb said quietly. Villalobos is right. We're on a floating biohazard. Even if some of us survive the infection, even if the storm doesn't kill us, what happens next? They'll quarantine us indefinitely, study us. We'll spend whatever's left of our lives in a government lab. There has to be another way. There isn't, Pruitt said. Raphael's right. The responsible thing, the only thing, is to make sure this virus dies here. The isolation ward had gone quiet. That was somehow worse than the screaming. I have a daughter, I said. 8 years old. Lives in Anchorage. If we let this thing get off the rig, if it reaches the mainland. I couldn't finish. Didn't need to. How do we do it? Webb asked. Open the gas lines on the drill floor. Set the emergency flares. The whole platform will go up fast. Hot enough to sterilize everything. I paused. Anyone who wants off, we put them in a lifeboat first. They take their chances in the storm. The storm will kill them, Peterson said. Maybe, but it's better than burning. We stood there in that hallway, listening to the rig groan under the storm surge, listening to the infected pound against the locked door, making the kind of choice that changes you forever if you're lucky enough to survive it. The announcement went out at 1,630 hours. All remaining crew, 43 people, we'd lost more while we were talking, to assemble in the galley. Mandatory. Everyone came because they knew something was very wrong, knew that when the drilling supervisor and the rig manager and the doctors all looked that grim, you didn't ask questions until you were sitting down. Diego had made coffee. Industrial strength, the kind that stripped paint. People clutched their cups like life preservers. We're going to be honest with you, I started. The virus that's infected 22 crew members is spreading. We don't have treatment. We don't have containment. And within the next 12 hours, most or all of us will be infected. Someone in the back, Lebedev, a Russian engineer, said, So we leave. We take the helicopters. Helicopters are disabled, Webb said. Federal quarantine order. Nobody leaves. Uproar. Shouting. Accusations. Someone threw a chair. I let it run its course. They deserved that much. When they quieted down, I continued. We have a choice. We stay here and wait to die or be infected. Or we destroy the rig, burn it hot enough to kill the virus, and take our chances in lifeboats during the storm. That's not a choice, someone said. That's suicide. Maybe, but it's suicide that keeps this thing contained. Keeps it from reaching Prudhoe Bay, Anchorage, Seattle. Keeps it from reaching our families. I saw faces change when I said families. These were people who'd left wives, husbands, kids behind to work this frozen hell. They knew what was at stake. How long do we have to decide? Someone asked. 2 hours. Storm peaks at midnight. After that, conditions are too rough to launch lifeboats. So we go now or we stay and burn. What about the infected? That was Diego. The ones in the isolation ward? They come with us or they burn, Webb said flatly. But I'll be honest, moving them risks further contamination. And they're deteriorating fast. Most will be dead by the time we're ready to launch boats. So we leave them to burn alive? They're already dead. Their bodies just don't know it yet. It was the truth, but it was a hard truth. I saw people look away, saw them thinking about their bunkmates, their friends, the guys they'd worked with for months or years, thinking about leaving them behind. I'm staying, Lebedev said suddenly. Someone needs to open the gas lines, set the charges. Make sure it burns hot and complete. I volunteer. That's a death sentence, Peterson said. Duh. But I have no family, no wife, no children, and I am good with explosives. He smiled without humor. Besides, I am Russian. We know about sacrifice. 3 others volunteered to stay with him. Hernandez, a welder from Corpus Christi with lung cancer he hadn't told anyone about. Lou, an engineer whose husband had died last year. Sorensen, a roughneck from Nome who just said, "Someone's got to do it, for people willing to burn so the rest might live." I wanted to tell them they were heroes, wanted to give them something meaningful, but there weren't words big enough. "You'll have 3 hours," I said. "That's how long it takes to get the lifeboats ready, get everyone loaded, get clear of the blast radius. At 2,000 hours, you open the gas lines. At 2015, you set the charges. And you run like hell," Lebedev finished, "except they wouldn't run. They'd stay and make sure the fire caught, make sure it burned hot enough and long enough to sterilize every surface, every sample, every trace of the virus. They'd stay until the heat or the smoke or the explosion took them. The next 2 hours were chaos. People grabbing survival gear, photo albums, letters from home. The lifeboats held 20 people each. We had 3 that were functional. 60 people total capacity. 43 crew, minus the 4 staying behind. 39 seats. Room for everyone. But then people started showing symptoms. Villegas, a driller from Alaska. Nguyen, one of the cooks. Patterson, who ran the ROV for underwater inspections. One by one, they spiked fevers, started sweating, eyes going cloudy. 9 more infected in 2 hours. 30 people left healthy. "We can fit them in the boats," someone said. "No." Webb was adamant. "They're contagious. You put them in a confined space with healthy people for hours during a storm. Everyone gets infected. So what, we leave them, or we end it quick?" Webb touched his pistol. "Painless. Merciful. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about triage. About making the hard choice so that 30 people might survive instead of 0 people. I thought about Tommy, about Jensen, about Paulson crawling across the floor with 3 bullets in him. These people were already gone. We just hadn't admitted it yet, but some of them could still talk, could still think, could still beg." Villegas grabbed my arm. His hand was burning hot through my sleeve. "Raphael, please, don't leave me here. I have kids. 3 kids. I know. So take me with you. I'll stay isolated. I won't breathe on anyone. He started coughing. Black fluid on his lips. "Please." I looked at Webb. He shook his head microscopically. "No room for mercy. Not today." "I'm sorry," I told Villegas. He knew what that meant. Saw it in my face. Started to cry. This big roughneck from Alaska crying like a child, and I had to walk away because I couldn't watch. The isolation ward was quiet now. All 22 original infected were dead. Their bodies lay on the tarps, already starting to decompose, the virus burning through them so fast their flesh was turning black. In a few hours, the fire would take them, clean and final. I hoped. At 1945 hours, we started loading the lifeboats. The storm was in full force, 60-foot seas, winds gusting to 80 knots, temperature -35 with wind chill. The boats were enclosed, motorized, designed for this kind of weather. They'd either make it to land or they wouldn't. 50-50 odds, better than zero. Pruitt came to me as I was checking the boat manifest. "I need to tell you something. Now's not the time." Petrex knew about the virus. They've known for 2 years. There was a preliminary survey, biological samples that showed something unusual. They commissioned this drilling operation specifically to recover more samples. For research, for profit. She handed me a flash drive. This has all the documentation, the memos, the approvals, the risk assessments they ignored. "If you make it back, you're coming with us." "No, I'm staying with Lebedev. Someone with scientific knowledge needs to make sure the burn is thorough." She smiled sadly. "Besides, I've spent 30 years lying for this company. Time I did something honest." I took the flash drive, put it in the inside pocket of my survival suit, right against my chest where it wouldn't get lost. "I'll make sure people know. Tell them Petrex killed us. Tell them they drilled into hell for quarterly profits." The infected who could still walk were being moved to the isolation ward. 9 people who knew they were dying, who begged and screamed and fought, but we moved them anyway because there was no other choice. Webb administered sedatives to the ones who'd let him. The others we had to restrain. I helped carrying Gwyn. He was light. The virus had burned through him fast, left him skeletal, and he kept whispering in Vietnamese. Prayers, maybe, or curses. I didn't know the language. When we locked them in, I heard Villegas shouting my name. Heard him promising he'd get better, that he'd fight it, that he just needed a chance. I walked away. Had to, because if I stayed, I'd break. I'd open that door and doom everyone. At 1958 hours, the first lifeboat launched. 20 people packed in tight, life vests and emergency supplies. Enough fuel to reach Prudhoe Bay if the storm didn't kill them first. I watched it hit the water, watched the waves slam it like a toy, watched it disappear into the darkness and spray. Second boat at 2003. Same process. Same brutal deployment into seas that wanted to kill them. I was on the third boat, last one off. Webb, Peterson, Diego, and 16 others. We climbed in at 2008 hours, and someone sealed the hatch behind us. Through the small window, I could see the rig. My home for 11 years, the place I'd spent more time than anywhere except the house where Emma and Lucia lived. Lit up like Christmas against the Arctic night. Lebedev was up there. Pruitt, Hernandez, Lou, Sorensen, opening gas lines, setting charges, making sure everything was ready. The winch lowered us. The waves caught us immediately, threw us sideways, nearly capsized us before the automatic stabilizers kicked in. Someone was vomiting. Someone else was praying. I just held on to the safety rail and watched the rig recede. At 2015 hours, the first explosion hit. Not as dramatic as the movies. Just a bright flash from the drill floor, followed by secondary explosions as the gas lines caught. The fire spread fast, faster than I expected, climbing the derrick like it was alive, reaching for the sky. Black smoke poured from every opening, thick and oily. The heat must have been incredible. Hot enough to vaporize steel. Hot enough to reduce everything to ash and slag. Hot enough to kill any virus, any bacteria, any trace of that ancient thing we'd pulled from the permafrost. I hoped. The storm drove us south. Our boat had GPS, emergency radio, distress beacon. The Coast Guard knew we were out here. Webb had made sure of that before disabling the helicopters. They'd come for us when the weather cleared. If we survived that long, if the virus hadn't already spread. Through the window, I watched the rig burn. watched 67 people's workplace, home, and prison turn into a funeral pyre. Thought about Tommy, dead in his bunk. About Jensen, naked and bleeding, scrubbing something invisible from his skin. About Villegas begging for a chance he'd never get. About the 4 people who'd stayed behind to make sure the rest of us had a future. Diego handed me coffee from a thermos he'd somehow managed to bring. It was cold already, but I drank it anyway. Tasted like cardboard. Tasted like home. "You think it worked?" he asked quietly. "The burn? I don't know. You think we're infected? That we're carrying it out of here? I don't know. You think your daughter's safe?" I looked at him. "Don't." He nodded. Went quiet. The boat's radio crackled. Coast Guard, confirming our position, telling us to hold tight. Help was coming. 12 hours, maybe less. Just survive 12 hours in a lifeboat in a storm that was trying to kill us. I closed my eyes. Thought about Lucia. About taking her to see the Northern Lights. About hot chocolate and dinosaur books. About the life I'd have if we made it back. If the quarantine didn't last forever. If I wasn't carrying 60,000-year-old death in my lungs. Peterson was looking at me. "You did the right thing." Did I? We'd all be dead if you hadn't made the call. Or worse, infected, spreading it to the mainland. You saved lives. I killed 31 people. They were already dead. You know that, maybe. But I'd still locked them in and walked away. I'd still listened to Villegas scream my name while I climbed into a lifeboat. Those were things I'd carry forever, alongside the flash drive full of corporate crimes and the memory of the rig burning like a beacon against the Arctic night. At 2,247 hours, someone started coughing. Patterson, the ROV operator. We thought he was healthy, thought we'd screened everyone, but the virus was tricky. Adaptive. Maybe he'd been infected days ago and it was just now showing symptoms. Or maybe someone else in the boat was the carrier and we were all already dead. Webb pulled his pistol. "Wait," I said. "Just wait." For what? For him to infect everyone in this enclosed space. For the Coast Guard. For quarantine. For something other than shooting people in a lifeboat. Rafael. "No, we don't know he's infected. Could be flu. Could be cold exposure. Could be anything." But Patterson's eyes were already going cloudy. His skin was taking on that gray tint. He looked at his hands like they belonged to someone else. "I don't want to turn into one of those things," he said quietly. "If I'm infected, if this is it, someone end it quick. Please." Webb looked at me, waiting for permission, for someone to make the hard choice so he didn't have to carry it alone. "Do it," I said. The gunshot was impossibly loud in the enclosed boat. Patterson slumped over, blood and black fluid on the wall behind him. 20 people crammed into a lifeboat with a corpse and the knowledge that any one of them could be next. The storm raged. The boat pitched and rolled. Someone was crying. Someone else was throwing up. And I sat there with that flash drive pressed against my chest, wondering if we'd contained the outbreak or just delayed it. Wondering if Lucia would ever see me again, or if I'd spend whatever was left of my life in a government quarantine facility, being studied by people in hazmat suits. Wondering if dying in the fire with Lebedev and Pruitt would have been easier. The Coast Guard picked us up at 0634 hours. Their cutter came out of the dawn light like salvation, and they pulled us aboard one by one, checking vitals, asking questions. They'd been briefed about the virus, had hazmat protocols ready. We went straight into quarantine, individual sealed rooms with negative pressure ventilation, the kind they use for Ebola. Patterson's body went to the CDC. So did blood samples from everyone on the boat. So did I, eventually. They flew me to Anchorage, then to Atlanta. 14 days in isolation. Tests every 6 hours. Waiting to see if I'd spike a fever, if my eyes would go cloudy, if I'd start coughing black fluid. I didn't. None of us did. The 30 people on the lifeboat stayed healthy. Whatever the virus was, however it spread, we hadn't been infected. Or we'd been infected, but our immune systems had fought it off. The CDC researchers couldn't agree on which. They showed me footage of the rig, satellite thermal imaging. It had burned for 18 hours straight, temperatures exceeding 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. When the fire finally died, there was nothing left but twisted metal and slag. They sent a remote submersible down to check the wreckage. No viable biological material. No trace of the virus. The permafrost samples were gone. The lab was gone. The bodies were gone. Everything gone except the memories and the flash drive. I turned it over to a journalist Emma knew, someone who'd done investigations into corporate malfeasance. The story broke 6 weeks later. Petrex Energy had known about the biological hazard, had commissioned the drilling specifically to recover samples for biotech research, had calculated the risk to human life and decided the potential profit was worth it. The lawsuits are still ongoing. Criminal charges against executives. Wrongful death claims from families of the 67 crew members. Vandermeer, the CEO, is fighting extradition to Alaska. The company's stock price dropped 90% in a week. None of it brings back Tommy, or Jensen, or Villegas, or the 28 others who died infected, or Lebedev, Pruitt, Hernandez, Lou, Sorensen, the ones who stayed behind to make sure the fire caught. I got Lucia for Christmas. We didn't go see the Northern Lights. Couldn't. The thought of going back north, back to the ice, made my hands shake. We stayed in Galveston instead. My mama's house with the new roof I'd paid for with blood money from Petrex. We drank hot chocolate and read dinosaur books, and I tried not to think about ancient things locked in ice. Tried and failed. Emma asked me what happened up there, what I'd seen. I told her the official story: industrial accident, fire, tragic loss of life. She knew I was lying. She's always known when I'm lying. But she didn't push. Just hugged me and said Lucia could stay an extra week if I wanted. I wanted. Some nights I dream about the rig. About Tommy thrashing in his bunk. About Jensen scrubbing his skin with a wire brush. About Villegas screaming my name. About the isolation ward going quiet. About the fire climbing the derrick like something alive and hungry. Some nights I dream about things that didn't happen. About the virus spreading. About reaching Anchorage, Seattle, Los Angeles. About Lucia getting sick, her skin turning gray, her eyes going black. About the world ending not with bombs or climate change, but with something ancient and patient that we'd been stupid enough to dig up. Those nights I wake up sweating. Check the news obsessively. Look for reports of unusual illnesses, mysterious fevers, people acting strange. So far, nothing. The outbreak died on that rig. Webb and Pruitt were right, the quarantine held. The fire worked, I think. The CDC won't give me a straight answer. National security, they say. Need-to-know basis. But I see the way the doctors look at me during my monthly checkups. See the extra tests they run, the samples they take. They're still studying us. Still trying to understand what we were exposed to. Still trying to make sure we're not carriers. I don't work the rigs anymore. Can't. The oil companies won't touch me. Liability issue, they say, though we all know it's because I testified against Petrex. I got a job in Galveston instead, teaching safety protocols at the technical college, telling 20-year-old kids about the dangers of the oil industry, about calculated risks and corporate negligence and what happens when you put profit above human life. Telling them without telling them. Because most of what happened on that rig is still classified. The Army took over the investigation, seized all the remaining samples, all the data, all the research. They're doing their own studies now, probably figuring out how to weaponize it. That's what keeps me up at night. Not the memory of the fire, but the knowledge that somewhere in a government lab, people in hazmat suits are studying the virus we pulled from the permafrost. Studying how it spreads, how it kills, how it transforms. Turning a natural disaster into a potential weapon. 67 people died to contain that thing. 4 people burned alive to make sure it stayed contained. And now it's in a freezer somewhere, carefully preserved, waiting for someone to decide it's useful. I tried to tell the journalist. Tried to explain that the real story wasn't corporate negligence. That was just the symptom. The real story was what the virus meant, what it represented. Evidence that there are things in the earth that shouldn't be disturbed, old diseases that our bodies can't recognize, evolutionary dead ends that died out for good reasons. She didn't print that part. Said it sounded too much like a horror movie. People wanted the corporate scandal, the criminal charges, the human interest angle. They didn't want to hear about ancient viruses that could end civilization. Maybe she was right. Maybe people don't want to know how close we came, how thin the line is between business as usual and complete biological catastrophe. But I know. The 30 survivors know. We have a group chat, nobody talks much, but we check in, make sure everyone's still healthy, still sane, still here. Last month, Patterson's widow, he'd been divorced but they were trying to work it out, messaged asking if I knew why he'd been coughing, if there'd been something wrong with him before the symptoms started. I told her no, told her he'd seemed fine, that the virus had just taken him fast. I didn't tell her about the gunshot, about Webb's pistol and the blood on the lifeboat wall and the choice we'd made to save 19 people by killing one. Some things families don't need to know. Some things nobody needs to know. Lucia asks sometimes why I don't work on the rigs anymore. She's 9 now, still loves dinosaurs, wants to be a paleontologist when she grows up, wants to study extinct things locked in ice. I tell her maybe she should study something else, something safer. Marine biology, maybe. Something that doesn't involve drilling into places that should stay buried. She doesn't understand. She's 9. How could she? But someday she will. Someday everyone will. Because the Arctic is melting. The permafrost is thawing. And there are things locked in that ice. Old things, patient things, hungry things that have been waiting a long time for the world to warm up enough to set them free. We got lucky with the rig. We contained it. We burned it out before it spread. Next time, we might not be so lucky. Next time, there might not be a Lebedev or a Pruitt willing to stay behind and make sure the fire catches. Next time, the thing we dig up might already be airborne before we realize what we found. I think about that a lot. Think about Tommy, 23 years old, dead in 3 hours. Think about how fast it spread through the rig, how adaptive it was, how it kept changing with each new host. Think about what would have happened if even one infected person had made it to the mainland. The CDC says infection mortality rate would have been close to 90%. Says transmission rate would have been off the charts. Says containment would have been nearly impossible once it hit a major population center. Says we got lucky. I don't feel lucky. I feel like a man who looked into hell and barely made it back out. Feel like I'm still waiting for the fever to hit, for my eyes to go cloudy, for the thing we dug up to finish what it started. Feel like I'm waiting for the call that says someone else drilled too deep, found another sample, let another ancient horror loose on the world. And knowing that this time, I won't be there to make the hard choice. Won't be there to lock the doors and walk away and burn it all down. This time, I'll be in Galveston with Lucia, drinking hot chocolate and reading dinosaur books, while the world ends somewhere far away, or maybe not so far. The permafrost is melting, the ice is breaking up, and all those ancient things we've kept frozen for millennia, all those evolutionary experiments that failed, all those dead-end species, all those viruses that killed their hosts so efficiently they drove themselves extinct, they're waking up, and we're going to dig them up, because that's what we do. We drill and we mine and we extract, and we tell ourselves the risk is acceptable, the profit is worth it, the technology will save us. We told ourselves that on the rig too. 67 people died, proving us wrong. I'm alive. Lucia's alive. The world's still here, for now. But I keep the flash drive in a safe deposit box in Galveston. Keep copies in 3 different locations. Keep waiting for the day when someone needs to know what really happened up there. What we found. What we lost. What we barely managed to contain. Keep waiting for the day when it happens again. Because it will happen again. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But soon. The ice is melting, and we never learn.